Welcome to the Bovine Podcast, where we decode the battles shaping dairy genetics. Today we're diving into Stud Wars, April 2025, the genetic force awakens, a galactic showdown where AI companies clash for Holstein supremacy. In this episode, Sexing Technologies, 53.5% net merit dollars takeover, the Death Star of Profit Genetics ABS Global's 68.5% polled coup, the Vader-like grip on horn-free markets, PTAT's Rebel Alliance fighting for diversity in a consolidating galaxy strap-in. This isn't just May the 4th, it's May the Herd.
All right, so we've got this report, and it's like someone snuck us the Holstein genetic playbook for April 2025. It's called Stud Wars, April 2025, the genetic force awakens, and honestly, it's a real page turner if you're if you're making breeding decisions these days.
Yeah, I can see that.
This isn't just, looking at sire catalogs. This is like watching a live battle for market share, between all the big AI companies.
Right.
And there are some big changes happening. Who's on top, who's maybe not doing as well.
Yeah.
And the big question for all of us is, what does this mean when you're at the tank picking out straws?
Yeah, for sure. That's the bottom line.
Think of this like a ringside seats to the genetic main event of the year.
I like it.
So this report, it digs into all the big numbers, the stuff that matters. We're talking TPI. That's the total performance index, still a big deal for a lot of breeders.
Yep.
And then there's NM1 net merit dollars, because you got to make money, right?
Yeah. Of course, profit's the name of the game.
Exactly. And then for those who like a good-looking cow, I've got PTAT, type and confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
But wait, there's more. We're even breaking it down by red and white and polled genetics, which are getting more and more popular.
Right.
So our mission today is to take apart all these genetic battles, metric by metric.
Okay.
And see what the big picture is for all of us,
Sounds like a plan.
And to help us make sense of all this data and what it means for the future of our herds, we've got our resident expert here.
Well, I don't know about resident, but I'll do my best.
Always the humble one.
Well, it's definitely a busy time in the genetics world. What we see in this report is, it's a real shakeup in market share. Shows you how AI companies are changing their game, and maybe even how the whole industry is shifting its priorities when it comes to breeding.
Okay, so you're saying it's not just about the numbers themselves, but
but what's behind them? Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's jump right into the thick of it and talk about genomic TPI.
Okay.
Looks like there's a new top dog in town. Sexing Technologies. They've made a pretty massive jump, going from 20% of the sire share back in June 2024 to a whopping 39.5% now in April 2025.
Wow.
That's a big move, like going from the minors to the World Series, Yeah,
that's a huge jump.
So what's the secret here? Is it just a couple of superstar bulls, or are they doing something different in their program?
Well, it's pretty unlikely that it's just one or two bulls.
Right.
To nearly double their market share in that time frame means they've got a really successful strategy going on. It probably comes down to how they're choosing their sires. Maybe they're focusing on specific genetic markers or using some really advanced tools to predict genetic merit.
Okay.
And they can also be really good at marketing, getting the word out to producers who are really focused on TPI.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, on the other side of that coin, we've got, the companies that have been the big names for a while, Select Sires and Semex Alliance. And they've both seen their shares drop. Select Sires went from 32% down to 21.5%.
Yeah.
And Semex went from 24% down to 15%. That's a noticeable dip.
Yeah, it is.
Is this just a case of, one company figuring things out better, or are there bigger trends happening in the industry that are causing this shakeup?
It's most likely a combination of things.
Right.
More competition for sure. Sexing Technologies is on the rise, and there are others too. Okay. And maybe Select Sires and Semex are, shifting their focus a bit. Maybe they're putting more effort into other traits or indexes that they think will be important down the road.
Interesting.
Or maybe they're concentrating on different types of breeders,
Yeah, different markets.
Exactly.
And let's not forget, GeneSX, they're coming in at 8%.
Definitely shows you how dynamic things are becoming.
All right, so now let's talk about the veterans, the proven TPI sires, the bulls with daughters out there producing milk.
Right.
So sexing technologies, they're still gaining ground here, up to 25.5% from 20%. But Select Sires is holding pretty steady. And look who's made a strong entrance. Alta Genetics with 13.5%.
Okay.
What's the story with these bulls that have stood the test of time?
Well, proven sires, they kind of show you the long game. It's not just about the initial genomic predictions. It's about how those predictions actually pan out with real daughters in real herds.
Right.
So all the genetics doing so well here tells you that they're not just picking bulls with good genes on paper. They're picking bulls whose daughters are actually delivering the goods, for TPI.
Okay, so it's about real-world performance.
Exactly.
Now, it's interesting that the others category still has a pretty big chunk of the proven TPI market, 30%.
Yeah.
So if we look at the big picture, combine the genomic and proven TPI numbers, sexing technologies, they're clearly the leader, going from 21% to 32.5%.
Yep.
Select Sires and Semex, they're kind of neck and neck for second place. And Alta Genetics is a solid contender.
Definitely.
So for someone like you or me, trying to decide which bulls to use, what's the takeaway message from all this TPI back and forth?
Well, if your main goal is to get the highest TPI you can, especially if you're really into genomics, then sexing technologies looks like the way to go right now.
Okay.
But Select Sires is still strong, especially with proven bulls. And Alta Genetics is coming up fast in the total TPI rankings. So there are good options out there.
So how do we choose?
It depends. You know what's important to you. Do you want the absolute highest genomic potential, or do you want the reassurance of daughters that have already proven themselves?
Okay, so risk tolerance comes into play.
Exactly. And you know who you trust, which programs you've had success with in the past.
Makes sense. All right, now let's get down to brass tacks and talk about the moneymaker net merit dollars.
Right. The bottom line.
And folks, this is where things get really interesting. Sexing Technologies, they've basically pulled off a major heist in the genomic NMMM arena. They've gone from 20% to a mind-blowing 53.5% of the genomic NM sire share.
Wow.
That's like winning the lottery twice in a row.
Yeah, that's an incredible jump.
So what's the secret formula here? Have they found the magic recipe for breeding money-making cows?
Well, it seems like they've gotten really good at pinpointing those sires that are predicted to be the most profitable.
Okay.
And that huge increase in market share tells you that they're doing something right. They must be really focused on those traits that are heavily weighted in the NMM formula.
Which are?
High milk production, good components like fat and protein, and really important things like health and fertility.
So they're hitting all the key points.
Exactly. They've found what the market wants, and they're delivering it.
Now, on the flip side, Semex, who used to be a big name in NMO, has really taken a hit down to just 8%. And meanwhile, GeneX and ABS Global, they're coming in strong in this genomic NM modal game.
Okay.
So what's this telling us about what's important for profitability in the industry these days?
Well, it could be that Semex has shifted their focus a bit.
Okay.
Maybe they're prioritizing other traits.
Sexing Technologies is still in the lead at 26.5%.
Okay. But get this, ABS Global has made a huge comeback, going from practically nothing to 16.5%.
Wow, that's impressive.
Alta Genetics and GeneX are also doing well here.
Exactly, and it shows you that while Sexing Technologies is good at finding bulls with high predicted profitability, ABS Global is doing a great job too. And not just with genomics, but with proven sires as well.
So they're covering all the bases.
Pretty much, and Alta Genetics and GeneX are right up there too.
So there are some solid options for breeders who are really focused on the economic side.
Absolutely.
Now this report, it uses some pretty colorful language to describe all this economic competition.
Oh.
It talks about an economic theater where Sexing Technologies pulled off a Death Star level takeover of the NMD galaxy, reaching 40% share. That's a 14% jump.
Okay.
And ABS Global is the rebellion surprise hero, blasting to 11.5%.
I like it.
Alta Genetics and GeneX are in a fragile alliance.
A fragile alliance.
That's what it says.
Interesting.
And even the others are losing ground.
Okay, so it's getting pretty intense.
Yeah, it is. So what does all this economic consolidation mean for us?
Well, I think it highlights just how fierce the competition is for those sires that are predicted to be the most profitable.
Right.
And when a few companies control a big chunk of the NM1 market, it does make you wonder about genetic diversity. If everyone's chasing the same traits to get that high NMO, it could lead to a narrower range of variation in those traits.
Okay, so less diversity.
Potentially, yeah. And that's why it's more important than ever to look beyond just the overall NMO number.
Okay, so what should we be looking at?
You got to dig deeper. Look at the individual traits that make up that NM value. See what each company is emphasizing and make sure it aligns with your farm's goals.
So it's about being more selective. Exactly. Don't just chase the highest number. Find the genetics that are the best fit for your operation.
All right, let's shift gears now and talk about PTAT, type traits.
Yeah.
And it's like we've entered a whole different world here. There's a lot more diversity in the top players.
Interesting.
Semex Alliance, they've actually gotten stronger in genomic. PTAT ASCOL is a new name to watch.
Okay.
And surprisingly, Sexing Technologies has actually lost ground here.
Mm-hmm.
And the others, they still control almost half the market.
Wow.
So why is PTAT such a different story compared to TPI and NMO?
Well, PTAT, it's all about the looks, the conformation, those visual traits.
Right.
And that often appeals to a different type of breeder.
Okay.
Some people prioritize shore ring success. Some want cows that just look really good. And those traits, they don't always line up with high TPI or NMO.
So it's a different set of priorities.
Exactly. And the fact that smaller companies and new players like ASCOL are doing well in genomic PTAT shows you that there's a real demand for that specialized type genetics.
So it's a niche market.
In a way, yeah.
Now, the proven PTAT results, they're even more surprising. Blondin Sires, Inc. has jumped into the lead.
Oh.
And once again, Sexing Technologies has taken a hit, and the others are still the majority here.
So what's going on with proven type sires?
Yeah, what's the story there?
Well, proven PTAT, that's all about what those sires' daughters actually look like.
Right, the real deal?
Exactly. So Blondin Sires being at the top means they're producing daughters that are consistently scoring high for type.
Okay, so they're really focused on conformation.
Seems like it. And the others still having such a big share shows you that a lot of breeders who care about type are going to those smaller, more specialized programs.
So they're looking for that specific expertise.
Exactly.
The report, it gets pretty poetic when describing this PTAT situation.
Ooh.
It calls it a confirmation galaxy's last stand, with Blondin Sires as the Luke Skywalker of type traits, fighting against the Empire's homogenizing forces.
Uh-huh. That's pretty good.
And it says the others dominate with 52%, making PTAT the host of diversity.
Okay, so it's a real battle for diversity in type traits.
Yeah, it's a big contrast to what we're seeing with NMO.
Right.
So as a breeder, what do you do? Do you have to choose between high production and good looks?
Well, it can feel like a balancing act sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You have to figure out what's most important for your operation.
Right.
If your main goal is milk production and profit, then NMO is probably going to be your focus. But if show ring success or having cows that just look great is important to you, then PTAT's going to matter more.
Okay.
The good news is that if you're focused on PTAT, there are a lot of diverse options out there.
So you have more choices.
Exactly.
Okay, let's zoom in on some niche markets now.
All right.
First up, red and white PTAT.
Okay.
Semex Alliance, they've really solidified their position here. Select Sires and others are still around, but Semex is the clear leader.
Mm-hmm.
So what's behind their dominance in red and white type?
It looks like they've been really dedicated to breeding high-type red and white sires.
Okay, so it's a deliberate strategy.
Yeah, and they've clearly built a good reputation with breeders who are looking for those red cows with good conformation.
Makes sense. Now, for another area that's seen a big change, polled NMA.
Right.
ABS Global has basically taken over this sector. They've gone from 22% to a whopping 68.5%.
Wow.
The report says it would make even the Death Star envious.
Uh-huh.
Semex, who is a player here, has practically disappeared.
Okay, so ABS is the go-to for polled and profitable.
Yeah, it looks like it. So what's the big deal about ABS having this near monopoly on polled genetics that are also high NMA?
Well, it shows you how much demand there is for polled genetics these days.
Right.
Nobody wants to dehorn calves anymore. It's a welfare issue, and it's just a hassle.
So polled is the future.
It's looking that way, and ABS has really positioned themselves as the leader in that area.
Okay.
They're offering polled sires that also have the genetics for high production and profitability.
So they're hitting all the right notes.
Yeah, they've really tapped into what the market wants.
All right, let's step back now and look at the overall sire landscape. When we talk about total genomic sires, Sexing Technologies is in the lead, but ABS, Global, and Semex are up there too.
Mm-hmm.
And the others still represent a good chunk of the genomic sires available.
Okay.
The report says Sexing Technologies might have a strategic vulnerability here, meaning their dominance in genomic share doesn't necessarily mean they have the most individual sires to choose from.
I see.
So what's the potential downside there?
Having a lot of high-ranking genomic sires is great, but having a lot of different genomic sires to choose from is also important.
Okay, so it's about options.
Exactly. And while sexing technologies might have the top bulls, ABS Global and Semex, they have a wider selection overall.
So that gives breeders more flexibility.
Right. You can avoid inbreeding. You can find those specific combinations of traits that you're looking for, and you can adapt to changes in the market. You know, what's important today might not be what's important tomorrow.
Right. So it's about having a deep bench.
I like that analogy.
Now, if we look at proven sires, sexing technology is at the top again, but altered genetics and select sires are right there with them.
Okay.
And the interesting thing here is that the others category makes up a huge 45.4%.
Wow.
That's a lot of smaller AI companies.
It is.
The report calls ABS Global and GeneX sleeper cells.
Sleeper cells.
Yeah, and it highlights Blondin Sires and CRV in their specific niches.
Okay, so what does all this tell us about the proven sire market?
Yeah, are these smaller players still relevant in the age of genomics?
I think they definitely are. You know, proven sires, they offer that real-world proof.
Right.
It's not just about predictions, it's about what those daughters are actually doing out in the herds.
And there are a lot of smaller companies that are doing a great job with that.
Absolutely, and that's why the proven sire market is still so diverse.
Okay, so what about those sleeper cells?
Well, it sounds like ABS Global and GeneX, they might not have the biggest overall share of proven sires, but they have a lot of bulls with good daughters.
So they're ones to watch.
I think so. And then you have companies like Blondin Sires focusing on PTAT. And CRV, maybe they're strong in specific international markets.
Okay, so there's a lot happening under the surface.
Definitely.
So when we add it all up, genomic and proven sires, sexing technologies is the overall leader. But ABS Global has made a big jump to second place with Semex and Select Sires following. And the others, they still have a big piece of pie.
Right.
So what's the final word on the Holstein genetics landscape as of April 2025?
Well, it definitely confirms that sexing technologies is the big player, especially when it comes to genomics.
Right.
And ABS Global, they've made a big comeback. But the traditional powerhouses like Select Sires and Semex, they're still strong contenders.
Okay.
And the fact that the others are still so relevant shows you that there's a lot of value in those smaller companies.
So it's a more complex picture than just a few big names dominating.
Exactly. There's room for everyone.
Now, the report wraps up with some pretty big statements about the future of breeding. Let me quote a bit here. It says, "The force of progress is stronger than ever, and these changes are heralding a new era in dairy breeding." It talks about challenges and opportunities for everyone, from the Jedi Masters of dairy cattle breeding to the Padawans of genomic matings.
I like that.
The consolidation at the top might seem daunting, but the report says even small farms can make a difference.
Okay.
So what's the bottom line here for the average dairy farmer trying to make breeding decisions?
Well, I think the key message is that things are changing fast.
Right.
You got to stay informed. You got to understand what's driving these changes.
And what is driving these changes?
Well, genomics is a big part of it. And the focus on certain traits like polled.
Okay.
But even though the big companies are getting bigger, there are still a lot of options out there.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Not at all. You just have to be more proactive.
Proactive how?
Do your research, set clear breeding goals, and look at all the options, not just the ones from the big names.
So be more strategic? The report ends with a quote from Yoda, do or do not. There is no try, especially when building the perfect herd.
Wise words.
So in this new era of Holstein genetics, what does doing actually look like?
Well, it means taking all this information and using it to your advantage.
Okay.
Got to know your herd and know its strengths and weaknesses. Then set goals that make sense for your farm. And don't be afraid to try different strategies and explore different genetic lines.
So be open-minded.
Exactly.
All right, let's do a quick recap of the key takeaways from this report.
Okay.
Sexing tech's genomic NMU dominance, plus 33.5%, reshapes profit genetics. ABS Global's pulled coup, plus 46.5%, creates near monopoly and horn-free sires. PTAT remains rebellion territory, 51.7%, others favoring specialty studs. Market consolidation crushes small players. Others outside the top 5 shrinks from 30% and 12.8%. Strategic breeding now requires balancing genomic powerhouses versus niche specialists. So of all those points, which one do you think is the most important for our listeners to really take to heart?
I think the one about market consolidation and how the smaller players are losing ground is really crucial.
Okay.
It doesn't mean there aren't choices out there, but it does mean that the big companies are having a bigger influence.
Right.
So you got to think about where you're getting your genetics from and what the long-term effects of this consolidation might be on genetic diversity.
So it's something to keep an eye on.
Definitely.
And it says that producers need to navigate this new world where genomic prowess battles proven reliability.
Okay.
So what do you think about that battle? Is it really one against the other?
I don't see it as a battle.
Okay.
I think both genomics and proven reliability, they're both important tools.
So it's about using them together.
Exactly. Figure out what works best for you and your farm.
Right.
And use both approaches to build the best herd you can.
All right. Well, that was a deep dive into the world of Holstein genetics.
It was.
Hopefully it's given all of you out there, the dairy farmers and industry folks, a better sense of what's happening and what to consider when you're making breeding decisions.
That's the goal.
It's a fast-moving world, and you got to stay informed.
Absolutely.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground here today, but I'm sure you all have your own thoughts and experiences. So what stood out to you? What are you seeing in your own herds? Head over to the Bullvine and let's keep this conversation going.
Sounds good.
As you're navigating this new genetic landscape, the big question isn't who's winning the stud wars. It's how can you use these changes to build a herd that's profitable, productive, and perfect for your farm.
That's the real challenge.
Until next time, good luck with your breeding decisions, and may the genetic force be with you. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for listening.
Take care, everyone.
And that's the state of our genetic galaxy. Empires rising, rebels regrouping, and dairy commanders facing tough choices. Whether you're Team Jedi, Proven Sires, or Sith genomic dominance, one thing's clear. The stud wars are far from over. For the full battle maps and data, visit thebullvine.com. Until next time, may your breeding strategies be with the Force. This is the Bullvine, signing off from the front lines of dairy genetics.